Welcome into the Sports Objective Podcast. As we've got a very exciting show, lots to talk about. Man, we have so little time. We've got one of the things we're going to be talking about tonight, as you see the guy on the screen, and those watching on archive or live right now on Facebook. We have and also YouTube and Twitter is Sam Razz of the Scott and Holman Pawdcast. And I tell you what, I'm so excited. By the way, Bubba's producing tonight behind the scenes. Thank you, Bubba, my friend. He's multitasking, so appreciate being the family man. I'll do that when we get off the air, but he's so good he can do it all. I'm not that coordinated, never have been. Kyle Barber will be joining us. You see him on the screen, or if you're listening right now, he'll be joining us in a matter of minutes. But Sam, we had to have you on because you know that I picked you guys, and I told that to Bubba. We picked you guys to go to the Final Four, and I hate that, there's sometimes when I hate to be right. This time, I'm very happy to be right because I'm really happy for you guys. First time since 1984. I remember that streak back in the early 80s, man. You guys, even NC State won that one with Slamma-Jamma, and then you have the 84 there. I mean, with I know Georgetown, but you guys had a nice run there when I was a kid, and it's good to see you guys back. I have to say that. I know I'm a Pirate fan. Obviously, I went to ECU, but conference mate. I actually, by the way, and I'll let you speak in just a second, but I had a guy, before I forget, he didn't realize, a Pirate fan didn't realize that you guys winning helped ECU by the sharing of the money.
Yeah, those win shares. I mean, as much as I hate to give that school in the Northeast that left us credit, it's been a good long while since we got some win shares from a team going deep in the tournament, and anything gives us a little extra bucks is a good thing. I think we got a decent little TV deal this last go around, but you compare the dollars and cents between like what we're getting in the AAC and the certain 5 leagues, what they're getting, any little bit helps. And yeah, it's great. And obviously a nice bonus of my alma mater and the team of my rooting interest getting deep. It's been a blast. Obviously Houston has this great history. You kind of laid it out, the Phi Slamma-Jamma, a lot of history before then too. Good teams in the 70s, Elvin Hayes, going back to the 60s. But as much as this program's had a good few years, that kind of elite history felt more like a history rather than a living thing with this program. You look at all the Final Fours this program has made, but you have that 37-year gap between the last one and this one. This kind of makes it feel a little bit more of a living thing, a little bit more like, obviously we knew this program was in a good place and going in the right direction, but just to have that, to know that banner is going to hang regardless of what happens on Saturday afternoon, it's really exciting. Obviously, I don't think anything in my 15, 16 years of real dedicated Cougar fandom really equals it. There have been good times, but there's really nothing like making a Final Four, and obviously just great time, just soaking in every bit of it that comes my way.
Well, how much and I've told you this before, I'm a huge fan of your coach, being a North Carolina guy that he is from Lumberton. I want to mention that to folks, but if everybody knows who I'm pulling for, I'm pulling for Houston in this thing because, I said they were a Final Four team. And now that you got to now that you're in the Final Four, the beautiful thing about the Final Four, as most people that are listening and watching the show knows, it's a whole different season. This is like, so the great thing about this is you guys have got a lot of talent, and I want to talk about that. But you guys have a lot of talent. Maybe people aren't paying attention. Like, for example, all we've heard all season long, and there's no question Gonzaga and Baylor deserve a lot of attention because they were clearly the 2 best teams. But you guys also have a great coach, and you have great players. I'm not just saying that because you're on and you're our friend, but you guys really, truly, I'm like, from a basketball fan, if you take you out of the equation, I was picking you guys because I really like what I've seen all. And then also the fact the Pirates beat you guys, we can say that we beat the national champion. So
beat them more decisively than anyone who faces this year so far. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, my cat Princess like jumping up there, but she's our guest, our mascot. We have Kyle Barber, the mascot, on the screen. We have my cat Princess, and of course you have the great Cougars. Speaking of which, how are the fans? I know you were talking about you, but I bet Houston, man. I'm happy for you guys. It's been a little bit of a drought. Knowing the history of the program, I'm not saying you guys have bad teams, but you would think, I was thinking about that this afternoon, knowing you were coming on, that 1984. It seems like that you guys would have had a Final Four appearance in the 90s, I'm just talking about how good the program has been and how much People love the program. And then you go 1984. I guess it has been that long. It just doesn't feel like that long.
And I think it should tell you how hard it is to get to this point, how hard it is to make a Final Four.
Yeah.
You could be that this season. There's plenty of really good teams this year and
Right.
many years past that did all they did and still didn't make a Final Four. I mean, you could be a great team, and I think this Houston Cougar team is a great team. I'm not just saying that because it's my team of choice, but you got to have some stuff break your way too. I'm not saying Houston's lucky to be here, but I think like all really good teams, you got to be really good, and you got to also have some stuff go your way. You got to have like someone with, for example, Dejan Giroux's competitive instinct. I really do think a lesser man, after he got that hip pointer injury against Cleveland State, might not have been able to give all he was able to give in that round of 32 game against Rutgers, where, to be frank, there were a lot of times in that Rutgers game where the Cougars looked dead and buried. And to have someone like Giroux who was able to go out there, play through, the pain of a hip pointer and give the Cougars a good performance, from that point guard spot, a guy who's going to make everyone around him better. I think, that's fortunate. To honestly, let's go back to 2014. That, we've been conference mates, I think, other than the one weird year that you guys, it was your last year in CUSA and our first year in the AAC. But we've been conference mates pretty much long time. It pretty much overlaps neatly with my time as a fan of this program. And in 2014, our program wasn't in great shape. You had Hoffein's Pavilion, which basically hadn't had anything done to it since well before my birth, certainly since Phi Slamma Jamma. You coming off 4 years of James Dickey, which just wasn't successful. The Cougars weren't very good in either Conference USA or the AAC. And you had the good fortune of literally in the city of Houston having an accomplished college basketball coach like Kelvin Sampson, a coach who under normal circumstances wouldn't have given U of H the time of day, but because he had some of that NCAA trouble in his past, because he had the 5-year show cause, and because he had the desire also to get back in the game, because I was familiar with Kelvin Sampson being with the Rockets. He, if you don't remember, he actually filled in as the interim when Kevin McHale dealt with the tragic passing of his daughter. I thought Kelvin Sampson's next chapter was going to be doing kind of the Quinn Snyder thing and being an NBA head coach. I mean, he actually got some interest in the Magic a few years ago when they hired Steve Clifford. The guy had been, coached under some good coaches when he kind of began his second chapter as an NBA assistant. I thought he was done dealing with the shenanigans of college. And when we started hearing that, no, Kelvin Sampson's interested in the Houston opening, I think the consensus between me and my co-host Dustin was, that's awesome. I hope we get him. And if this guy can't get us back to something approaching a decent, regular NCAA tournament team kind of program, who can? And obviously, after kind of a rough first year, it's been great. He's consistently overachieved, expectations, or in the case of, this year, 2 years ago, achieved very high preseason expectations. And it's great. And I think, the city, it's a very pro sports city. It's a very fickle city. I'm a Houstonian. I love Houston. It's my hometown. But I think if you listed off all the adjectives for Houston fans and Houston pro sports fans, I don't know if loyal and staying through thick and thin would be near the top of the list. But I think what's great about this Final Four appearance is that there's going to be some buzz. There's going to be some momentum around the program for a good while after this. That Houston basketball is going to become, a trendy thing in the Houston area. People beyond just the Houston fan base, beyond people like me who are going to follow it year in, year out regardless. It's actually going to be an interesting thing to the casual Houston fan or the non-alumnus. And I think that's just kind of the gift that keeps on giving from having this kind of appearance.
You make a great point about, obviously, for you guys to get back to the climb of the mountain, to the top of the mountain like you have with Sampson. That's kind of like in a different respect with Dooley for ECU. Coming back, he had a good time the first time around, the youngest coach at that time in Division I and NCAA. And, in the bad circumstance of getting fired, he does his time at Kansas, Florida Gulf Coast, and then he comes back to us. And I just want to get your take, and then we'll come back to but from you following the American at East Carolina, what was your take on Jaden Gardner leaving?
I think it was unfortunate. It wasn't surprising, not so much because of what's going on at ECU this year, but because of what you're seeing around college basketball. I mean, I think and this is probably an old number now, but there were well over 1,000 guys in the portal as of last week. There are more guys in the portal right now than there are spots for guys in the portal. And it seems like just about everyone who isn't in an established excuse me, boss, situation isn't with a team that's a proven winner. And even lots of guys who are with teams that are proven winners right now are going out there. I think you're seeing kind of the general reaction to this very special circumstance, this one-time eligibility freebie you could transfer without penalty. And I think I was frustrated, or it was frustrating because I really do think that having a guys like Jaden Gardner don't grow on trees. Guys like Jaden Gardner, aren't a dime a dozen, even for a program like Houston, a guy who put up Jaden Gardner's numbers, a guy who had Jaden Gardner's skill set. We've had some good players come through our program, but I can't name a lot of Houston Cougar players. I can't name more than one or two Houston Cougar players that I would definitively take over Jaden Gardner if I could put together a starting five tomorrow of AAC guys. And I think, I'm curious to see what he does at the next stage, because he is a great talent, because he's a guy, I think he can play for just about anyone in the country. But it's frustrating because I did think that surrounded with the right guys, and I do think in a normal season, I think we kind of talked about this in the last episode, but it's a frustrating what if ECU plays this season with this group of guys in a season where you don't have the context of COVID-19, if you don't have COVID-19 in the background.
Exactly.
I'm not saying it means ECU is the league champion or anything like that, but I don't I didn't just see what I saw from ECU beating Houston very comfortably in Greenville. I remember the game after that, y'all pushed Memphis, a very good Memphis team, a Memphis team that for the last month and a half of the season, I think was playing better basketball than anyone in this league, not named Houston. You push Memphis to the brink at Memphis, and just that's not an easy thing to do. And I think it kind of says there's something there, but I think it's really just figuring out the offensive end for ECU, because you saw that team get a lot better defensively, but other than the lightning and the ball they caught against Houston, when you scored 82 points and really ran Houston off the court in the second half, when I watched ECU, you couldn't get 40 minutes of really good offense, even with Jaden Gardner, even with a guy like Tristan Newton, who I think is a guy with a lot of potential, a guy I think is worth building around. And I think if ECU holds on to him, I think that's something worth building around there. But really, I think any player that was really good and not on a A1 top 10 or 15 tournament kind of team, there's at least some risk that they're going to go in the portal and at least see what the interest is, if not land at a new institution.
With us right now, joining us, Kyle Barber. What's up, dude?
What's going on, guys? I had to take a phone call, but now I am back. And talking about Jaden transferring out, and, it's kind of been the talk of ECU basketball the last few days, and other players transferring out. I just saw Memphis is having several players transfer out. After,
I think 3 today, I think.
Yeah, after they won the NIT. So, I mean, it seems to be the cool thing to do now is transfer. And I don't like this rule. I don't like the being able to transfer one time without having to sit out. I think it's a terrible rule, and I think it's made college basketball a complete mess. And hopefully it doesn't continue over into football. But it's a bad rule, and I think it's going to be regretted very, very fast.
Well, guys, I haven't read the whole thing, but I know the Supreme Court today heard arguments about, of course, amateurism with the NCAA. They pushed them very hard, but they also were talking about pretty much it's opening up a slippery slope. It's a slippery slope, so to speak. And I really believe, as I said before, guys like Jaden, guys that potentially or may not make the NBA, want to get paid now because they're not going to get paid at the next level. And then you have a situation of likeness and image, you have all that stuff. And then now you have, with this new rule, it's basically free agency for college basketball. It's what you've done. You've created a huge mess, something that sounds good on paper, or that you say, quote unquote, fair, because, the coaches get to leave, but we don't. There's a reason why they made them sit for a year, is so that you wouldn't have a complete mess that you've created now.
Well, I mean, it's like scholarships have been devalued. You know what I say? I say let's do this. I say we pull the scholarships. We just pay them, and then it's their responsibility to pay their way into college or get loans and grants if they can. Let's just pay them. Let's just put them all. Do away with scholarships. Let's put them all on salary. Treat them like employees, and then if it's their responsibility to figure out how to pay for school, and hopefully you can get a grant, or if not, you can take a student loan and have to pay it back like everybody else.
And if you can't shoot
And
3 pointers, we're going to fire you.
yeah, and if you suck, well, you're off the team. You ain't on scholarship anyway. We're going to go ahead and just kick you off the team. And you ain't got to worry about a transfer portal. So be careful what you ask for. You just might get it.
Yeah. Well, and another thing that people don't realize, you guys both do, but a lot of people don't, that scholarships are not 4 years anyway. They're year to year.
Right.
So you don't have a 4-year guarantee, but Sam,
most of the time you do.
Yeah. I mean, most of the guys are going to get a free ride. Sam, let's talk about, we can talk about that later. Let's talk now about, because we're excited for you guys to be in the Final Four. Let's talk about how many tickets will Houston have access to, knowing that we have COVID-19. Do you know offhand?
I'm not sure. I think the allotment's a little bigger because they're playing these last couple of games at Bankers Life Fieldhouse, the Pacers place. Although I will say, and I hope this is something that continues once we get into a time with a normal NCAA tournament. I liked having the early round games on campus sites. I liked having you had some games at Bloomington, you had some games at Butler. Yeah, I thought that's cool. Cool. I think having games on campus, I think it improves the quality of play. I think you saw in some of these first games at Banker Life Fieldhouse that teams, getting used to the kind of the pro stadium background, and you've seen in Final Four games too, games played at like football stadiums and stuff like that. You have a lot of really bad shooting games because guys, you're shooting on a background that's just so different than what you're used to. But I think I know they're having a slightly bigger allotment just because the bigger arena. I'm not sure offhand. I think a few hundred, but it's one of those for each round game. U of H puts out there like, hey, you can request tickets to this. I know people associate. Like I know a couple guys I actually went to school with, associated with the Hispanic Alumni Association, got tickets because they were in leadership there, and that kind of bumps you to the top and things like that. Obviously, family. Worth noting here, I'm glad you mentioned this. Noted Houston mattress tycoon Jim McIngvale, who made a big public show of betting $1 million on the Coogs. I think it was the Elite Eight game against Oregon State. He actually paid for a charter of a number of coaches' family and wives and players' family. It was really awesome, and from a guy who obviously very, very noted like Houston business guy, but not someone who's specifically a U of H alumni, not someone who's specifically a UH booster. So I thought that was a pretty cool story.
Yeah, well, Sam, just to ask the most obvious question in the world, what will it mean to you and the Cougar fan base if you guys were to actually win the national championship? I mean, down there in the shadow of the Big 12 schools, Texas, TCU, etc. What would it mean for the Cougs to win a national championship in one of the Big Two sports?
I think for starters, it would give the Cougars something over the other big state schools because the school in Austin, as well as Texas A&M, Baylor, the schools you mentioned, no one other than UTEP, the old Texas Western team, has a national title in basketball among Division I state of Texas schools. So off the bat, it gives you that, and I think just gives you some kind of proof of concept, if you will, that hey, like just because U of H didn't get the invite, 25, 30 years ago to the Big 12 when the SWC split up, it doesn't mean that U of H can't compete for titles in sports, can't, have a good athletic department, can't, if theoretically given the kind of money that comes with being in a bigger conference, can't continue to compete in that setting. I think there's a lot of respect for the American among the Cougar fan base. I think this isn't a situation like UConn where, the fan base blames the league and just can't wait to see the end of it. But, to be honest, like all of us, if we somehow luck into an invite to a bigger money league, as much as we like this league, I think all of us would like a bigger paycheck and a chance to get a fair shot at the football postseason. As much as I rail just about every opportunity I have about what a sham I think the college football postseason is, especially compared to like what we're seeing now. Can you imagine a college football postseason that had this kind of excitement, that had the kind of intrigue as March Madness? I mean, it's just.
Well, here's the thing. Two parts. Yeah, of course, if you have an opportunity to go to a quote unquote Power 5 conference, you would.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. At what point, all right, you mentioned UConn. Well, they're gone now, but UConn was in the American, the first year of the American. They won a national championship.
Yep.
Houston is in the Final Four.
Yep.
Cincinnati, look, the only reason they lost to Georgia in the Peach Bowl was because of poor clock management at the end. Yep. UCF won a New Year's Six Bowl. I don't know how much the American can do over and over and over and over and over again before somebody realizes, okay, yeah, they deserve Power 5. I guess it would be Power 6 status. Yeah. I mean, it's nonsense. So that the term, forget the money for a minute. The money is obvious, but just the term Power 5, and they use it in basketball,
which drives me nuts. It's insane.
So what does that mean? Does that mean Houston doesn't have, even though they're in the Final Four, that you don't have as much quote unquote power in basketball as TCU?
That's stupid.
I mean, it's moronic. It doesn't make any sense. It needs to be the first thing that needs to be done until we fix the bigger problem is they need to have to change the term. It needs to be autonomous 5 and everybody else, because that's what it is. It's autonomy. There's no power. I mean, yeah, you have power, but it's not. To me, the term gives you a disadvantage by saying you're non-power 5. To me, that's a disadvantage in recruiting right there. And it's irritating. But anyway,
I mean, 2 of the 4 teams in the Final Four. I mean, Gonzaga's not in a power league. Has that stopped Gonzaga from just tearing every team they play limb from limb?
And it's not accurate. That's supposed to be football only.
And in basketball, where there's nothing holding you back, just like in baseball, where there's nothing holding you back, look, you're able to build a program. So who's to say in football? Well, people always go, well, UCF or Cincinnati, they couldn't compete with the SEC. Well, maybe they, if they had equal, like UCF, as they built their program over the last few years, if they were considered equal to the other conferences, then why wouldn't the players had went there instead of Florida and Florida State and Miami? Why couldn't they build their program? That's the difference. Houston can build a program in basketball to compete for a national championship. So can Gonzaga. East Carolina can in baseball. You can in football. There's a glass ceiling that you can't break through because you're told repeatedly, if you're not in one of these Power 5 conferences, you can't make the playoffs. I think there is such ammunition, for lack of a better term, for a lawsuit. It's right there in front of us. They say it over and over again on ESPN, etc. Well, you can't play for a national championship if you're in a Group of 5 conference in football. They flat out just say it. To me, that's just grounds for an antitrust lawsuit.
Antitrust, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and the very fact that what's great, Sam, is the very fact that you have a situation with Baylor and with Gonzaga, when you have Houston, and look at UCLA, a perfect example of a team. Nobody, I mean, maybe outside of UCLA fans, I did not see UCLA making the Final Four. As I told you, I got 3 out of the 4 right, which normally I would get 1 or 2 out of. So I'm happy I got 3 out of the 4 for the Final Four. But the very fact that UCLA made it is crazy, and the fact that they are one of the best, college basketball teams in history, big picture. But in recent times, they've been struggling. But you always have to live up to Wooden. And Wooden hasn't coached there in 45 years or more, 46 years, something like that. It's a long time that he was retired. And, the man won 10 national championships in 11 years. and then they won again in '95. They've got 11 titles, but it's funny how you have them, and it's weird because they're kind of like the underdog when history they're not the underdog because they've won so much, you know.
I mean, really, both of the teams in this Final Four with probably, I would say, the most cumulative history. I mean, Houston with the Phi Sigma Jamma years, Elvin Hayes before that, some good teams in the '70s, and what you just mentioned with UCLA. And I mean, I wouldn't say Houston UCLA's likelihood of getting the Final Four is similar. I think a number of people had Houston Final Four. I did, you did, a decent number of people out there. And yet Gonzaga and Baylor, these two teams that are supposed unstoppable force, and Gonzaga's had a lot of good history in the last 5 to 10 years. But I mean, your history of Gonzaga being an NCAA tournament consistent team is pretty much just this century. And Baylor, I think they hadn't made a Final Four since the late 1940s or early 50s, and didn't have really much in terms of basketball history. I mean, the most notable thing that happened to Baylor basketball up until this year was, I mean, their one-time coach covering up one player murdering another. So it's like, that's been Baylor basketball's history. And yet them and Gonzaga are the two teams with the supposed inside track, with the favorites certainly here. And just, that's something that definitely hasn't escaped my attention here. Now we're down to the last four.
And we also have, you can put your comments if you're watching live in our comment section for Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And, this is a great point here, guys. Johnny Robertson, one of our viewers, says, this past Monday, I was pleased to hear Jay Billis say on XM that he considers the AAC to be a major conference. That's shocking. I can't believe that coming.
Well, I think in basketball it is. I mean, I think in basketball, you got some people that aren't going to say anybody that's not in the Power Five is a major conference, but I think you got to include the American, the Big East, and the A-10 all as major conferences in basketball. To me, if you don't, you're stupid. And the Mountain West is right there too, but definitely the American, the Big East, and the A-10.
Yeah, and the fact is, another thing too is what guys, 357 teams in Division I for basketball.
Correct. Yeah,
versus 100, it's only 130. So I mean, but still, the fact that this Final Four, I think this is one of the best Final Fours we've had in a good while, because you have some interesting history with UCLA and Houston, and then you've got the two teams that everybody. In fact, another point I want to make, to be fair, is Gonzaga and Baylor most likely, if we had a Final Four last year, they were good enough to make it last year. Baylor was so good, and probably the same thing with Gonzaga, but Baylor was, I mean, so those two teams have been good for a good while. But I'm just so excited for you guys because, again, if you guys can do it, we can do it. And I want to tell Pirate fans, Pirate Nation's hurting over the whole Jaden Gardner thing, but it's definitely concerning. But the good news is we have plenty of time. Where Jaden leaves, there are other good players out there too, that we can get. It'll work out. I really believe it'll work out for the best interest of East Carolina. I really do. And I know people are probably thinking I'm nuts to say that. It's not spin. It's the way I feel.
I hope. I don't see how it can be a positive to lose Jaden, but we'll see.
Like I said the other night, the one thing, this is like, if you look at it, guys, free agency or trade, whatever you want to call it, not a trade, but free agency. We need, if we in the free agency, aka the transfer portal, we need 3-point shooting desperately. I know that it sounds like I'm a beat a dead horse, but that's what we need. Jaden Gardner does not shoot threes.
Right. Well,
we desperately need it.
We still could have gotten 3-point shooters and kept Jaden, but
if we could get that, I'm just saying that. But I'm just saying
that would have been even better. See, than you have Jaden kind of drive it inside. It ain't there. He passes it outside. Boom, hit a three. But he's gone. That's the whole thing. There's no need to try to spin it into something positive because it ain't. So he's gone. I don't care where he goes. I don't care what he does. It doesn't matter. He's gone. So the big thing now is, what are we going to do? And in the meantime, and in the between time, what I'd like to see us do is, how Houston made the Final Four this year, and hopefully on to a national championship. I think East Carolina needs to do our part to represent the American, with Memphis winning the NIT. Memphis winning the NIT, Cincinnati going to the New Year's Six Bowl, Houston in the Final Four. So I think it's time for the Pirates to do their part and make the College World Series. So
there
that's
you go.
what we can do in the in-between time.
And we're going to host our Sam. You heard it here first. Our very first Super Regional in Greenville. It's going to happen this year.
Yeah,
So
not our
Nice.
very first Super Regional. Not our very first Super
in
Regional.
Greenville,
But it would be our very first
on
time
campus.
hosting it if we made it.
That's right.
I hope the committee doesn't do to y'all what they did to us in 2014 and
it's been done
and
to
just
us already.
give it to Chapel Hill or
Yeah.
Well,
Raleigh.
we've hosted regionals, Sam. But the problem is, you gotta basically be a national seed. You gotta be, unless you get upset,
top 8.
You gotta be a top 8 seed to host a Super, and that's what we're shooting for, is to try to be a top 8 seed, and hopefully we'll get there. I don't know. The American baseball non-conference didn't look so great.
Nope.
A few good wins here and there for teams. East Carolina had some nice wins over Duke, over North Carolina. Cincinnati had a surprising win last night over Louisville. I know the Cougars have been a little disappointing so far.
Had a walk-off last night.
But it's going to be interesting to see. I know right now you're focused on basketball and the Cougs in the Final Four, but these 4-game series in baseball that the Americans doing, not very many other conferences are doing that. So whoever does make the regionals for the American, I think it's going to be a huge advantage, because regional play, man, that's always 4 games in 3 days, and you got to play double hitters lots of times, particularly if you get in a loser's bracket. So I think having to do this in conference play several weekends in a row will benefit whoever makes a regional for the American.
And I would say there's a parallel between what Houston did in basketball and what I think ECU could do this year on the baseball side. I mean, I'm not saying everyone else in the American but ECU is bad, but I think D1 Baseball said it, and I don't disagree with them this week, that if the season ended now, there would not be a postseason team in the American outside of ECU. So, there's certainly the opportunity, I think, for the Pirates to kind of do what the Cougars did, come out of the end of conference play with a pretty nice and gaudy record and, get yourself in a good position for seeding. If you gentlemen were expecting a full-throated defense of how the Cougars have done this year in baseball, it's not coming. It has not. Non-conference has not been kind to this team, and I think what you were talking about with the 4-game series, I think it also kind of exposes your pitching. I mean, a lot of teams in the sport can hit, but if you don't have that depth of pitching to go a 4-game series, I think your postseason hopes are kind of limited. And certainly I would say my team has not shown itself one capable of throwing a lot of pitching out there in a weekend series. And I think it's good. I think it's kind of a postseason advantage. And I think to the bigger picture, I think it could work out for ECU pretty well, that no one else in this league has really shown themselves capable of being an NCAA tournament team outside of Greenville.
Hey, who would be right now the second best team in the league? How's
Central
Wichita
Florida,
doing?
I would say.
UCF, okay.
I mean, Wichita has a good record. I think there's some questions about who they played, but I mean, they could be one of those teams that emerges out of conference play. But I think it's just UCF. UCF took some good non-conference games in there, but again, I don't. If the tournament came out right now, I don't think UCF would be in the field, and I don't think they would have much of a grievance for not being in the field.
Right, a lot of baseball will be played though, so we'll see.
Yep,
it is. It's just weird how not to have the typical midweek games. That's going to be hard for me to get used to.
Yeah, I really don't understand the point of it. I do think that, like I said, there can be some advantages if you make a regional for these 4-game weekend series, but I don't understand why we're not having midweek games. I understand about COVID and conference play, but I really don't understand. I don't get how. I mean, I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to minimize not getting your conference games in. You're not playing a midweek game. That's less travel. But I really don't see a lot of point in not playing a team from down the road, because that's what you do typically in midweek games. You play a regional team. And but it is what it is.
I have one question for you, being this is kind of a, and no pun intended, inside baseball question when it comes to inside the program, if you will. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go ahead and say that you guys won the national championship. I'm giving you a hypothetical. How much pressure?
I like this hypothetical so far.
Okay. Yeah. So you're going to win you win the national championship. with Coach Sampson. How much pressure does that put on the football program with Dana Holgson, with him?
I think it's already kind of about maxed out. I mean, maybe a small amount more, just because you could say, basketball has a national title, but I think you'd already see that argument. And well, basketball made the Final Four, so I think that's already pretty maxed out. I think at this point, the fan base, people who are patient, people who are not patient, it's basically at this point, it's the same expectation. You finally got a conference schedule that misses Cincinnati, misses UCF. You finally got a non-conference schedule where you didn't end up getting BYU or Oklahoma on it. I think the toughest team we've got in non-conference is Texas Tech, and Texas Tech's coming off their worst couple years stretch, I think, since Mike Leach was there. Certainly, probably the Tuberville years maybe thrown in there too. So the 9 to 10 wins right there is there for you on a silver platter, kind of the same way it was for Major Applewhite in the 2018 team. The same way I think if in a normal year we'd been able to achieve 8-4 against last year's schedule, I would have been thrilled because that was a tough schedule. And if we go 8-4 against this year's schedule, it doesn't mean squat to me. It means you went 8-4 against a schedule where you should have won 9 or 10 games. So, but I think to your original question here, I think maybe it ramps up the pressure marginally, but I think that's already there. I think the fact that this team went to the Final Four, the fact that this team is now an every year NCAA tournament contender, a team that's going to at least be a threat to go into the second weekend, the sport, it's already there. And to some extent it's fair because you're paying the staff a lot of money. To some extent it's not fair because the football postseason and what goes into building a football program versus what goes into building a basketball program. I wouldn't say it's easier, but you gotta take a lot more swings on guys. There's just building the rosters are different, but I think the point does remain that the expectations are very, very high. I think the time that they've been given for roster clear out, for bringing your guys in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that's done. And yeah, I think having a program on your campus doing what Cougar men's basketball is doing, I think ramps up the pressure even more. But I think it's also, it is good to have those positive vibes. I think going to the Final Four, that's a rising tide that lifts all boats, so to speak. It increases engagement across the board. So that's the positive, but it comes with that the expectations, obviously.
Yeah,
No
I haven't liked Dana Holgerson's goofy ass since he made the comment about East Carolina and Marshall being the reason. I forget the exact quote, but it's when he was at West
feed his
Virginia.
players.
Yeah, when he was at West Virginia, schools like East Carolina and Marshall are the reason we can't feed the players, meaning cost of attendance, etc. Saying that Group of 5 schools were the reason at the FBS level the Power 5 couldn't do what they wanted, and now look, he's at a Group of 5 school, making a lot of money. So he's a clown to me. Sorry if you like him, but he's a clown.
It was wrong for him. He went way, to me, in my opinion, I liked him, but he made that comment was way over the line, especially when he was friends with Ruffin McNeil.
Yeah. And he looks like Murdoch from the A-Team.
Oh man,
can't argue that one.
Have you ever noticed that he looks like Murdoch from the A-Team?
I never thought about that. I do love that. That's one of my favorite shows growing up as a kid. Now you've got me now in my head. I've got an earworm of that theme song in my head. But anyway, called the A-Team. Yeah. But as far as let's talk about the other teams in the Final Four. We're talking about that. How about Gonzaga making his second Final Four appearance? Mark Few, I didn't know this. Bubba told me this earlier. Year 22 with the Bulldogs. I mean, that's just crazy how he stayed with that program, and they've made the tournament I believe every single year. If my memory serves me right.
Yeah, it's funny. Minnesota, probably the 10th or 11th best job in the Big Ten, actually poached Gonzaga's coach way back in the day, Dan Monson, and Mark Few was Dan Monson's top assistant. It's kind of wild to think in 2021 that Minnesota at one time was able to get Gonzaga's coach. One of those things that changes over the years. But I got to watch a decent amount of him this year, and I don't think I've seen a better offensive team in, I would say, 24, 25 years from being a kid to now of actually physically watching teams. They're just so good. They're good on the perimeter. They're a team that regularly, I think it's been since the beginning of last season that they haven't shot, I think it was like 50% or something inside the arc. Just absurdly efficient on offense, a good defensive team. And I think what makes them so dangerous is they're now recruiting at a high level. They're no longer having to kind of, make it work with, 3-star West Coast guys or good players. I mean, they've had a lot of really good players come through that program that maybe weren't evaluated right out of high school, but they're now, I think, the number one player in the class of 2021, Chet Holmgren, is seriously considering Gonzaga. Jalen Suggs was a guy who had a ton of offers from big leagues to play quarterback for them. He elected to play basketball at Gonzaga. So they're getting big recruits now, but they're still doing a great job evaluating people. I think this isn't going to be the last year Gonzaga's really, really good. This might be the best of a bunch of really good teams, but this isn't a team that's going anywhere anytime soon. I think that's not really a hot take to say that. I mean, they made the championship game. What was that, like several years ago against North Carolina? Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, not like this is their first trip deep in the tournament, but I think they went from being kind of the Cinderella, the cute random West Coast team that you only think about come mid-March, to, okay, this is a pretty good team. This is a 3 through 6 kind of team, to this is one of the best 4 or 5 teams in the sport in any given year. And it's been impressive to see, and impressive that, kind of like you pointed out, that Mark Few stuck it out for 20 plus years to kind of see this from cute Cinderella to terrifying, force of nature.
Well, they were able to build a program because they can in basketball. You think of Boise State, what they've done in football, that they had a glass ceiling. They couldn't build. They got stuck where they were. Whereas Gonzaga could keep building because they could legitimately try to get to the point where they could win a national championship.
And I think West Coast basketball talent, kind of the same way, I think probably before that, Southern basketball talent, Texas basketball talent, I think a lot of people tend to, focus on the major metros, kind of in the upper Midwest and on the East Coast. And there's a lot of people out here in this part of the country. There's a lot of good basketball players. And I think Gonzaga, for some part of their history, if not present day, are benefiting from, maybe one, the Pac-12 being kind of inconsistent, and two, just players out here maybe not being evaluated the same way, a player maybe in the New York City area, or a player in the Chicago area, or, insert name of East Coast city, gets evaluated. It's impressive to see it,
No doubt. How about Baylor? Their third ever trip to the Final Four, the first time since 1950. None of us on this podcast were alive when the last time that they did that. And then, how about the fact that it's been
Dave 18 was born in 51.
Yeah, 52, but who's counting? 18 for Scott Drew. I forgot that he's been there that long. And then, like you talked about earlier, Sam, we were just talking about that they had one player kill another player. I mean, that was just that is just crazy to think about, that mess went on. And then he comes in, does a nice job. And like I said, last year, you could argue they had a good chance to win the national championship last year, which was sad because they didn't have a tournament to have that shot. They do have their shot this year. But what are your thoughts on Baylor?
Their roster construction is interesting. We talked about this when we were previewing Baylor on our episode last night. They don't have anyone who qualifies as a blue chip on this roster, top 30, top 35 guys. They have good recruits. I think a good chunk of the guys they brought in as high schoolers are top 100 or top 120 guys, but they've done it with evaluating good, like getting guys who are well-rated prospects, but not guys who are one and done, not guys who are going to spend less than 2 or 3 years in the college ranks, guys who they could bring in and develop. And I think they did a really good job finding guys from mid-majors who they believed fit their culture, they believed have the skill to, play for a Big 12 program. As much as I hate giving any kind of deference to the Big 12, as someone, an alumnus of a school in the Big 12's footprint who's not a Big 12 school, but that league's a good basketball league year in, year out. That's a brutal league to play in, year out. And they found guys like Maceo Teague, I believe from UNC Asheville, Adam Flagler from Presbyterian, guys, didn't play for big time programs before this, but guys who the Baylor staff kind of, saw as contributors, and just a really good mix of transfers who maybe kind of flew under the radar, good recruits, but not guys who, were thinking NBA or the pros after a year. And just, I think, as much as I hate giving Baylor credit for anything or saying nice things about Baylor, Scott Drew's a hell of a coach. Scott Drew clearly is getting the most out of his roster. I mean, the stats, it's terrifying. I mean, they're a 41% three-point shooting team. I mean, if your best three-point shooter is shooting 41%, you're doing pretty decent. And they're doing it as a team. I think they have 5 guys who are shooting 40% or better from deep. They're great at getting looks. They're a very unselfish team that he's very clearly understood what his rotations are. And a guy I really like on their team, Mark Vidal, I would say the most Charles Barkley-esque player since Charles himself. I mean, how many other 6'5", 250 power forwards are there in the sport right now? I thought that was a real fun player on their roster, but I think they built it kind of the same way that a lot of teams have gone deep in this tournament, not by getting one and done guys, not by getting cream of the crop guys, but by getting good players who are willing to be coached, willing to stick around for at least 2 or 3 years in the college game, and guys who maybe got undervalued as recruits out of high school, but who have proven themselves at other schools against Division I competition. It's not that dissimilar to what Houston's done, because Dejan Giroux and Quentin Grimes were both top 50 recruits out of high school, but Giroux goes to UMass. They have a coaching change. He decides to go to Houston. Quentin Grimes goes to Kansas, his disappointing freshman year, comes to Houston, develops there, and Houston's recruited a fair amount of top 100-ish, but not really blue chip high school guys. So, I think there's more than a few similarities between how the Cougars and Bears put their roster together.
Very excited to have with us, joining us, one of our favorite guests back with us to talk about the Final Four. Former ECU men's basketball coach, Coach Mike Steele. How are you, Coach?
I'm great. How are you guys? Sorry, I'm running a little late.
That's okay. We've had a lot of fun talking to our good friend Sam Razz of the Scott and Holman Pawdcast. They actually cover Houston, Coach, and very excited for them to. I have 3 out of the 4 teams in the Final Four, so I'm very happy. I had a good year.
It looked like it was going to be awful, but I think our last time we talked, I thought Baylor and Gonzaga would be there. And then, the other ones I wasn't sure of, but I don't think anybody saw UCLA, who had to do the playing game to go overtime to beat Michigan State, that they would be there. But I'm telling you, Calvin Sampson he's a good coach, and the guy at UCLA, Mick Cronin, they're the same. They're both tough as nails, and they're going to punch you in the mouth, and that's what they did to Michigan. I watched the game, and the first 5 minutes, they knocked Michigan down every time they could, and Michigan finally just didn't respond.
It was like watching Cronin's old Cincinnati teams, really.
Oh yeah.
Oh no, without question. Mick, he grew up in Cincinnati. His dad was a high school coach. He would have stayed there forever. But Cincinnati didn't offer him the contract extension that they should have, because they were disappointed that he won 20. It was almost like the Steve Logan era that we had, where he won between 20 and 25 games every year. He got to the Final 16, but he couldn't get past that. So now he's in the Final Four. He just didn't take Cincinnati with him. Yeah. They never should have let him go. And he never would have left. But they just felt like going to the Sweet 16 was not good enough. And now they're in disarray, and UCLA is UCLA.
No doubt. And they've got a great coach. And Coach, speaking of staying a long time, Mick is the kind of guy, like you're talking about, loyal guy. He can stay there and build something special for UCLA they haven't had in, 10, 15 years?
A long time.
In a while.
No, and, he's tough. I'm telling you, he is tough. I've been to his practices. He makes Mike Krzyzewski look like a nice guy. He's so tough. Or Bob Huggins look like a nice guy. I had to take the first time I went to practice. I had to take Drew out of practice after 20 minutes, and he's heard every bad word that I've ever said. But Mick took it to another level, and that was after we had we had lunch with Mick. And Mick is just the nicest, quietest guy. And the first time one of those guys missed a layup in warm-up, like in practice, he went crazy and he stayed crazy. But you know what? Like his guys, when he went to UCLA, my thought was, I don't know if he can get those guys to buy into how tough you have to be. And when you hear those guys do interviews, the only thing they talk about is when Coach Cronin came here, the ones that stay, we're going to be tougher than anybody else. And now they're big believers.
No doubt. I mean, to go to the Final Four, I was just talking about how interesting it is, Coach, that you have Gonzaga and Baylor as favorites when you have the history of the programs of Houston and UCLA that have the history, but not in recent times.
No,
And then you have two guys like you have two teams like Gonzaga and Baylor that you would think those are the underdogs when this year is more likely, and no offense to Sam, that Houston and UCLA are more the underdogs.
yeah, they are. But I think that if I was going to take the four teams and take the two teams in a fight, I would take the two underdogs every time. Now, I don't know if they're talented enough to beat those teams, but in a fist fight, I'm taking those two teams.
So you think that is there a chance that Houston and UCLA could be playing for the national championship game?
Well, if they're not, it's going to be because the other ones are just too talented. But if it's a fist fight, and if the referees let them play, yeah, I mean, UCLA had to beat Michigan State, and they beat everybody else since then. And their best players out with an ACL tear, and it's going to be a fist. If it's a fist fight, they'll win. They have a chance. If not, if they call it real close, then Gonzaga's just too talented.
No doubt about it. You know, Sam, with the time remaining we have with you, I know you have to go here in a couple minutes. Just tell us your final thoughts, getting ready for what are you hearing from the fans as far as are you guys going to have any kind of big celebration where everybody can go? I know it's kind of hard in the COVID world, or is there any kind of like virtual kind of deal?
They've had some stuff down. They've had some stuff downtown Houston. Actually, Houston's campus is about 3-4 ish miles from downtown. They've had some. They've had some COVID friendly events there. Some big watch parties and stuff. I think a lot of people have been asking him to have something at TDECU Stadium or the arena. I think the stadium would be better just because the arena.
Outside.
Yeah,
Yeah.
outside. Also, it's not by design. It's just not a big arena. They designed it for every seat to be a good seat rather than cramming 12 or 13,000 in there. So they haven't announced it yet. U of H likes to leave things to the last minute, but I hope they do. I hope they do have something for the fans in Houston because there's just a lot of buzz around the program. And I agree with what Coach just said. It's Houston's going to be an underdog in this one. I do think Houston. There are scenarios where Houston can't out tough Baylor. There's scenarios where UCLA can't out tough Gonzaga, but rightfully they'll be the underdog. I will say I don't hate Kelvin Sampson having 5 days to prepare for Baylor. I don't hate that a team of junkyard dogs on this Houston roster are going to spend the next several days hearing about how Baylor's the best team since sliced bread, the best offensive team in a while. Those guys have been hearing it. Those guys were hearing it when they heard all about Jim Boeheim's son being the
Sam,
best shooter.
Does it help you guys get fired up even more as it would for East Carolina, the fact that Baylor's a Big 12 school and in the state of Texas?
There's no love between Baylor and Houston. There's a lot of bad blood that Baylor canceled the football game that was supposed to be played this year extremely last minute, and just really just any former Southwest Conference school, whether it's TCU, SMU, Baylor, the school in Austin, Texas A&M. There's gonna be some bad blood there, even if the bad blood and actual on-field contests haven't been happening much since I was a small child.
You know what,
No doubt.
Sam? The other thing though is that the flip side of that is those teams have been able to beat teams that have had some freshmen playing, and so like Baylor's got a bunch of seniors and Gonzaga has a bunch of seniors, and that's different than what these two teams have been able to beat. And if they get through the first 5-8 minutes, and if they don't call it close, and they haven't been calling it very close, then I think that if they call it close in Gonzaga, both those teams will win. But if they don't call it close and make it a fight, then those two teams are the best fighters.
No
Completely
question.
agree.
By the way, Sam, where are you watching the game? And then we'll let you go.
I'll be watching it from my couch here in beautiful and sunny Southwest Las Vegas. There on Saturday afternoon.
You're supposed to give me some kind of great story so that Coach Steele will be impressed. Like you're going to the Strip, you're going to bet a whole bunch of money. One of the sports books, you got to give us something there.
Hey,
and you're talking about you're going to be on the couch.
So Sam said hookers and cocaine for everyone. If
he can't top the chewing tobacco from Kyle. So that don't even try.
All right, look,
this is true.
Look. You know what? I got my Taylor Pride and my spit bottle right here, Coach. So.
Okay, no, I wish I was there. I know you guys have probably talked about it, but what are the thoughts about Jaden leaving?
My initial thought went to Coach Dooley coming into year 4 of his contract and losing his best player. It puts him in a tough situation. I don't know what expectations are next year, but I do know that after year 4, you typically got to extend or you got to make a decision. So I hate that for him, losing his best player going into year 4, particularly with the kid from BC coming in. I thought, with him coming in and Jaden, and maybe we could get some outside shooting from somewhere, that we'd have a chance to be really good next year. And I'm certainly not giving up on next year, but that's my first thought. Not so much where Jaden's going, but it sucks for Dooley.
Oh, no, I agree. I feel bad for all the coaches. You know what? Unfortunately, this is going to be the era that we're going to live in, because I just saw where Syracuse had 3 starters. They went to the final.
Coach, we're having trouble hearing you. Are you?
We are in a terrible position because I don't know if
Is Coach on his phone? Is he covering up his mouthpiece somehow?
Coach, yeah, we're having trouble hearing you for a second.
Oh,
I tell you what, we need to let Sam run. Sam, promote everything, and we'll let you get out of here, because I know Coach wants to talk a lot about Jaden, and I don't want to keep you.
Yeah, I'll leave the floor. You can follow us on Twitter at SHPAWDcast, or go to our website, www.shpawdcast.com, if you want to hear how this team got here and kind of a little bit more details of how the Cougars got from round of 64 to present day. You can subscribe to the Scott Holman Pawdcast or catch episodes anywhere you get podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, all those good places. We're there. We're going to be talking more general AAC once the season's done, once we have a little bit more roster clarity as the transfer madness comes to a conclusion, hopefully at some point here in the next few months. But find us in any of those places. Always great to talk with y'all. Always great to come on. Hopefully I'm going to come back and talk to y'all about the 2021 national champion Houston Cougar men's basketball team at some point.
There you go.
That's my sincerest hope.
Hey, Sam, and I'll say one more final thing. The only time you'll ever hear me say this on the show, go Coogs. We're going to be pulling hard for you, all right?
Go Coogs. Take care, everybody.
See you, Sam.
All right. Good night. I love Sam Razz, a great guy. And speaking of great guys.
Can you hear me?
Hopefully, Coach. Keep talking.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you right now. Yep.
Okay. No, I feel terrible for Coach, and I feel terrible for the players, but like if a program like Syracuse can lose 3 starters and be in the final 16, and 2 of them are freshmen, there's 1,200 players now. Almost 25% of the players on scholarship are in the portal.
Wow.
They're in the portal. And Syracuse's women's team got to the final 16. They have 8 girls in the portal.
Oh my God.
It's just awful, in my opinion. I thought the one and done was the worst rule that the NCAA could possibly come up with, and this one is 10 times worse. It's 10 times worse.
Well, I don't understand what's going through the kid's head. I agree with you; it's a terrible rule, being able to transfer one time without having to sit out. But I just don't know why everybody wants to transfer.
Well, you know what?
Maybe it's just the youth of today. But you mentioned all these.
Because they don't have to work for anything.
Teams that are having success. Memphis just won the NIT. They're having 3 players transfer. I don't understand the logic in a lot of this.
Kyle, I'm gonna give you a couple logics. The first one is, these kids, because of social media, a lot of these kids played on AAU teams together, and they see what the NBA's doing. Guys are going to play with the Brooklyn Nets. They're going to go play with LeBron, and a lot of these kids are, interacting every day, and they're like, let's go play together at X, or let's the two of us go and play wherever. We're friends. And then the other thing I think that has really hurt East Carolina is a school that has always had a great atmosphere for social life. And this past year, there's been
no doubt.
There's been no social life.
Yeah.
And in Jaden's case, I just think he could not find a better place to go than East Carolina. That's just my opinion. And I think he's getting lots of information from outside that they think he's going to go play at a higher level and play out on the perimeter. And in my opinion, he's going to have to really improve dribbling, shooting, and passing because he's not very good at any of those. He's really good at playing unbelievably hard and playing. They list him at 6'7" or 8. He's probably 6'5".
Yeah.
I just don't know. I think it's a horrible decision. That's just my decision. And I wish the kid the best of luck. He's really a good kid, but boy, I think he's getting some bad advice.
Well, Coach, that was what we've been talking about. We talked about the other night. We've been hearing about this for 2 straight years. And let me make another point. Let me make one more point about this whole thing. Do you guys remember when it was after his freshman year and all these people started rumors of speculating of, God, I would hate for Jaden to transfer. And he comes out and says, no, I'm not going to transfer. I'm not going to transfer. Yes, I'm that guy for bringing it up. Because I think that we need to educate these kids that there's a thing called legacy. There's a thing called your word. And the team was built around Jaden. Coach could have got rid of him. I'm not saying he would, but he purposely kept Jaden and to build the team around Jaden. And that's the problem I have is his dad, and I love, not anti him, but his dad has been telling him that you need to go to a bigger school. And hey, this is what he's telling him. So Jaden's listened to his dad. So I'm taking up for Jaden here. Jaden's hearing all these people tell him that if he goes to a quote unquote bigger school, that means you have a chance to go to the NBA. He could go there's a guy named Blue Edwards, Coach.
Yeah.
Did he have to go to a bigger school to make the NBA?
He was the 11th guy picked in the draft.
That's correct.
He had a great coach, but go ahead.
Yeah. No, but I'm just saying that my point is it's kind
stupid. Dave, it's stupid. And I know, I don't think his mom had any idea this was going on. I think his dad's been peddling him since January to all these other schools.
Yep.
But with the idea that he's going to have to play on the perimeter. And the games I went to this year, every time he'd be on the perimeter, I'd say, God, they got to get him in the post where he can get fouled.
Yes.
And I don't know who he's going to guard on the perimeter. I just think I don't know. But I think it's the new era. And one of the reasons you don't transfer is because you got to sit out a year. Now, I mean, thank goodness I'm not coaching now because I was pretty tough on guys. And then I'd hug them up. But now you can be tough on them. And the next day you don't have time to hug them up because they're gone and they're playing right away. Terrible.
Well,
terrible for college athletics.
No doubt about it. And it's a situation now. Let me ask you this question. When you have Coach Dooley who's trying to build a program, and you know how difficult it is at East Carolina with basketball, how do you build a program when your roster is going to be changing every single year? Before you came on, I call it the free agency of college basketball, aka the transfer portal now.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure that if I was at East Carolina, I would ever recruit another high school kid you think about it. Like, if you get a really good player, like the kid that went to Syracuse, and he had to sit out a year. Well, now, if you get a really good player he's gonna go where he thinks it's greener.
Well,
And
Yep.
like I listened to Boeheim do an interview, and they said, "What are you going to do?" And he goes, "Well, just going to take. Looks like we're just going to go take players from other teams. It's like the NBA. We're just going to go take players from other teams."
you know what
And
I would do if I was coach of East Carolina? I'd cheat. I would cheat. I would make every recruiting violation I could, get all the star players I could, because if you don't get caught, great. If you get caught, then we suck like we always have.
the only problem with that, Kyle, is we have no money. That's the only problem.
Well, that's a good point, Coach.
No,
That's always a pesky problem. That old no money
it's
thing.
a problem.
It'll screw everything up.
When I was coaching, assistant AD came in during Christmas, and he brought in a bag. It was a paper bag, and he said, "Coach, don't tell anybody I did this." And he brought in, it was full of 2-for-1 Burger Kings. And I said, "Have you ever been on a road trip with guys that have eaten Burger King for 2 straight weeks? Come on now." But no, that was the mindset. Here, let me ask you guys this. I've been thinking about this, and I don't understand. Navy plays football in our conference.
Sure.
And they don't do anything else. Why would we not play football in our conference and then have everybody else in either the Southern Conference, the Big South, the CAA, where you can get on a bus? Like if we were in the CAA, our facilities in basketball would not be close to the best, but they'd be in the middle of the road, and we'd have a chance. We have as good a chance of winning the CAA tournament as we do finishing first, second, or third in this conference. But the travel, the cost, does that not make sense?
I actually think John Gilbert has addressed that, and not for basketball,
The problem.
but if he had his druthers, he would love to see the NCAA allow regional conferences form just for Olympic sports, and have just football and basketball be played in the quote unquote, the money. They're the two sports that make the money. They get the TV contract. So they're the two sports that are played in the American, for example, and then the Olympic sports would be played. The non-revenue Olympic sports would be played in a regional conference, but that's something that hasn't happened yet. I'm sure it's a good point. I'm sure Cliff, he probably enjoys playing baseball in the American, though the argument could be made that the Colonial may have better baseball at times than the American.
You know what, Kyle? We've won in baseball forever. I don't care who's coaching.
True enough.
And I think Cliff, I love Cliff, but when you're playing the first 20 games of people that are playing in the snow, and then they come here, and you can recruit within 50 miles of here because we have great baseball, and Cliff's a great coach. But if you do that, like, there's no reason for our basketball team or our women's basketball team to go play in Texas. And so if you went to the CAA, you have a chance to not only compete, but you have some rivalries. It just makes so much sense, because this conference we're in is, in my opinion, is the worst conference we could possibly be in, because we're not in the Power Five, but we're in a conference that can't take non-qualifiers, which Skip Holtz, 12 of his 13 guys that went and played in the NFL were non-qualifiers. The last time when Coach Lebo won in April, which is probably the only coach in the history that's won a game in April, we won that conference. We had 3 non-qualifiers in that group.
Yeah, I've always thought that this conference, that's an old Big East rule. And I always thought when this conference became the American and was not included in what was the BCS then became the Power Five, I always wondered why they didn't change that rule like the rest of the non-Power Five schools, where you can take non-qualifiers. And I think it's something that should be looked at.
No, you know why they don't is because Houston doesn't have to do it, because they've got, most of their players are within 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And Cincinnati doesn't have to do it because they're academics in the Midwest. we need to do it because the guys that are going to go to North Carolina and NC State and don't qualify, those are the ones that got us with Coach Logan and with Skip. But now we can't do that. And
No, and I do think we can win in football without doing that. I think it's just going. I think Houston's about to do that. I don't know about basketball though.
I hope so, but you know what? Those kids that were coming here are now going for the last 5 years to App or Coastal Carolina. And Coastal Carolina, if you'd have told me 5 years ago Coastal Carolina would have a great football program, there's no way. And they couldn't do it without those non-qualifiers.
No, I don't disagree with you. I've always, and you kind of answered why the American doesn't do it, but they did. Cincinnati and Houston were in Conference USA, and they were taking non-qualifiers. I think East Carolina's biggest problem, particularly in basketball, is you look at Memphis, for example, and they're the number 2 school in Tennessee. With apologies to Vanderbilt, if you're not going to go to Tennessee, you want to go to Memphis. In Ohio, if you're not going to go to Ohio State and you want to play in state, you're going to go to Cincinnati. Houston's a big city school. Obviously, they have to recruit against the Big 12, but they can get their share of players. Where that's the problem with East Carolina. If it was just East Carolina and North Carolina, or East Carolina, North Carolina, and Duke even, I think it'd be a lot easier to build a basketball program, particularly now that we're in the American. But the problem is you got all these other damn ACC schools. Coach, do you think one thing I was talking about
Kyle, hang on a second. Hang on a second, Kyle. First of all, I never thought I would ever say this, but I think you're 100% correct. And it's hard for you.
Oh, my God.
I can't even hardly get that out of my mouth, but go ahead.
Kind of to piggyback off that, one thing I've discussed off the air, I've always said that it's going to be hard for East Carolina to build a basketball program, particularly to compete in the American when we can't recruit in state. And I've always thought that was our biggest the biggest thing. And you recruited here. I've always thought that was the biggest thing holding us back, that we can't get local talent. We can't get regional talent. I mean, we could if we wanted to take the third best player on the team. But do you think East Carolina can build a basketball program that can compete consistently in the American without being able to recruit local talent?
Kyle, I thought if you would have asked me a year ago, 2 years ago, I would have said, boy, it's so hard. I mean, it's so hard. But now that guys can go wherever they want to go after, I don't know how we do it. I really don't. And anybody that doesn't think that Joe Dooley and his staff aren't working 100 hours a week, they're crazy. They're absolutely crazy, because when they look at a Winthrop, or they look at and they go, well, how did they? Well, it's because they're playing teams that aren't very good, and they win the conference, and the guy's a good coach, but they're playing teams that aren't. We're playing teams that have got national championship banners up. If you go to if you were going to go, and let's say you're going to recruit a kid, and he's going to visit Memphis, Houston, SMU just did a $50 million renovation. Cincinnati did a $60 million renovation. You can go right down the line. And if you said, visit all the schools that are in this conference and tell me where you want to go to school, we would be 9th or 10th or last. And if you can't get guys that pick you over someone else that's in your conference, you got a problem. I don't care who the coach is. I mean, I don't care who you have coaching. And I said, when Joe Dooley got hired, I said, if Joe can't win in this conference or be competitive, then nobody can. Well, I still stand by that.
Coach, as far as that goes, does hurt to lose Jaden, but the ultimate thing we need is 3-point shooting. That's what we need really, really bad, is 3-point shooting. Do you think Coach has addressed that? Do you think we have that coming in? We've got.
Well, I think he's trying.
7
guys. I think he's trying, but again, like if I was coaching again, at East Carolina, I would try to do what Oral Roberts did. I would try to get everybody that can shoot, and I wouldn't care how tall they are, how big they are. I would never, again, if it was me, I would never recruit another player at East Carolina over 6'8". Because if they're over 6'8", they're not going to be any good if they come. And that's just being truthful. So get guys 6'4", 6'5", and make them guard you and shoot threes and bust your butt and make it competitive. But we're not going to be able. It's like when John Thompson came in and he made the statement, we're going to go nose to nose and run the ball. No, you're not, because we're not going to have good enough players. And I'll never forget Lincoln Riley. I had dinner with Lincoln Riley, which I called him Doogie Howser for 2 years. And I mean, now he's making $10 million a year. But I said, Lincoln, you tell me why it's 3rd and 1 and we can't run the ball. And he said, Coach, it's real simple. We can teach guys to step back and stand and shadow box for 3 seconds. We don't have anybody on our offensive line that can knock their guy over. And I said, okay, good answer. Thank you. Because I wondered, that's why we never tried to run the ball at 3rd and 1 when Lincoln was here, because we couldn't get 1 yard. And I think it's the same thing with basketball. I mean, we can't, we're not going to stop guys in the low post. We got to go get 6'4", 6'3", 6'2". I don't care if they're all 6'2", that can run and tough, and easier said than done. But that's what I would do.
So, in other words, what you're saying, the game is actually trending the small ball anyway, Coach. I love the front line, but as far as the backcourt, the guards, you hear that all the time about guards. But it's true. If you got to have great guards, and you got to be able to shoot incredible percentages from the 3-point line, and we haven't. Last 2 years, we've struggled with that.
No, and I know that talking to Joe, that they bring guys in that have been able to shoot in the past, but have not been able to carry it. Like, I've been not a lot of. I go to practice sometimes when it's raining and I can't play golf, but otherwise, like, Duels will go, I haven't seen you. I said, well, the weather's been good. Sorry, but. And I watch them in practice, and I mean, we got some guys that can really shoot, but they've not been able to carry that over to the game. And he knows that we got to have 3-point shooters. I mean, you think about it. Houston is 28-3, and we beat them. Yeah. And the reason we beat them is because we made 12 or 13 threes.
That's great. You look over the last couple. Because you look over the last couple of years, there's been so many games we're close, and if we made some more threes, handful of threes, we win the game. Where we didn't, and that's why we lost the game.
You know what, Dave? After we beat Houston, we played.
I'm having a hard time hearing you again.
Hello?
There we go. I got you now.
Okay. After we beat Houston, we played SMU in Memphis on the road, and we lost close games, and I think we were 2 for 20-some in those 2 games. And that's, and I do think COVID this year really hurt us, because when we had a couple runs, then we had COVID, and then, we just didn't recover from it.
No doubt. And Coach, as far as I know, we're talking about Jaden leaving and all that, but I think with the coaching staff, it gives them time now by the announcement he's leaving. It's not like he's leaving in September or October or he's kicked off the team. This gives us a time to. I know that everybody's saying, "Yeah, Dave, but it's Jaden Gardner." But at the same time, there's a lot of great players, as you mentioned, in the transfer portal that could come in and make a difference. Don't you think?
Without question. I mean, I don't know if we can find anybody in the transfer portal that's tougher than him, but I guarantee you we can find guys that are his size that can go on the floor and dribble, pass, and shoot better than him.
And that's something that, again, I want to reiterate that we love Jaden Gardner, but as far as
you know what? if we're going to go play in a pickup game, 3-on-3, he's my first choice because we're going
Yeah.
to stay up and win the games. We're going to stay up. He's got a great heart, and he did all he could do here, but I just hate to see him leave because he had a chance to, as you mentioned, the legacy, which doesn't really seem to make any difference. But I can tell you this, after coaching Blue Edwards, if he was good enough here for the next 2 years to go to the NBA, he would go to the NBA.
Right.
And he's got a better chance, in my opinion, here playing 38 minutes a game than he does going somewhere playing 17 minutes a game. And
Right.
you know, Dave, the guy that you look at, Ralph Sampson's son that was here, and his mom and dad thought he needed to play the 3 spot, even though I saw him shoot 5 air balls from the free throw line. He went to Georgia Tech and he played 10 minutes a game and played in the low post. So
Yep.
I don't know. It's a tough gig, I tell you that.
No doubt. And the fact that, with Coach Houston, looks like things are going well for him. And I believe that Dooley, we're not going to see another thing. I'll make the point for Dooley is you mentioned about COVID. I don't think we're going to have COVID next year.
You
And
know, I
that's going to
hope
help
not.
us.
No, I hope not. And Coach Houston, like the SMU game, it was a perfect time for the season to stop because
Right.
it gave everybody, like my guys, including me, we were unbelievable. And I told Coach it was the best half, maybe the best half I've ever seen East Carolina play. And when we beat Houston, it would have been a wonderful time for the season to end.
Right.
And it didn't. And so now everybody's, but I think it's impossible to judge a coach during this past season with the COVID. I don't see how guys can justify, like at Indiana, firing their guy and paying him $10 million when everybody's talking
That
about
was crazy.
no. And Auburn firing their guy, their football coach, and paying him $23 million because he's the only guy that's can beat Alabama. It makes no sense to me. This year's a wash, I think.
Well, the very fact of you were talking about that, I understand what Kyle is saying in a normal time with Coach Dooley, but how can you count? That's my argument. I know it's a tough business. People are going to, obviously going to be fired, hired, and all that. If you haven't been fired, one day you will be. You always hear that. But the very fact that this year you saw a lot of improvement in the non-conference, and when COVID hit, everything derailed. I just don't see how you can say next year, even though I understand that we're talking about normal times, but this is not a normal time. And I just don't think that you can count year 3 under Dooley when things were going very well. COVID hits. Yes, everybody can say COVID affected everybody, but there was that Tulane game. We had like 5, 6, 7. I don't know. It's not that many scholarship players. We go down
Yeah.
to New Orleans. We should have won that game. We didn't have all our guys. Stuff like that happened. I don't know too many guys that could win when they don't have, but maybe 7 scholarship, maybe 8 scholarship guys.
No, and I think I stand by my statement when we hired him. Like, if he can't get it done here, then without question, we're in the wrong conference, and somebody needs to look at the bigger picture. And if we got to pay to get out of this conference for the other sports besides football, then pay it. Figure out how to pay that rather than try to figure out a new coach because Joe's proven great recruiter. He was at Kansas, but worked with a great program. But then he went to Gulf Coast and he won. He had a winning season here. The first time he was here,
Yeah,
I think we've had 5 in 50 years, and
that's
I was
correct.
one of them. And
Yep.
that was with Blue Edwards. My gosh. So I think that would be the last thing I would be worried about is, like who's going to be the next coach. Like we've gone through, I can't hardly even name them all. And you know what, Dave, ironically, Ricky Stokes was the only coach that came here that had a losing record when he came. And I went through and looked, I said, like, I won 70 some % of our games and Bill Harrion was the 5th winningest coach in the country, percentage-wise, when he came. And Mack had won everywhere he'd ever been. Lebo had a winning percentage. I mean, I'm not saying all of it, everybody was a good coach, but there's been guys that can coach.
Right.
It's just we're in a horrible, for basketball, we're in a horrible conference, in my opinion, a horrible. And I don't know how we can survive without getting out of this conference basketball-wise.
Let me ask you this, and I hear what you're saying. What about one of the things to talk about Jaden Gardner is you always hear about, we got to go up so that you can get more exposure. But the kid, and I talk about your days of like the CAA, which obviously I'm very fond of. Those were my teenage years and my college years with Eddie Payne.
You trying to make me feel old? But go ahead.
No, no. It was not last year I graduated, but I was talking about how our program. Remember, Coach, on Home Team Sports, we would have like three or four games a year on cable TV, and now people are complaining about an app. Which streaming is the way things are going, and you've got about every single game, including now baseball and Olympic sports are on. I mean, I don't understand like exposure. My God, the kid was on TV every single night, every game.
No, and like as you said with Blue, he was the 11th person picked in the draft. He could have not ever been on TV. It's not like these scouts, they're paying millions of dollars to go find guys. I mean, there's guys, like the great player now, young guy at Memphis, he went to Morehead State, for crying out loud. I don't even know if they have TVs there. And no, that's a horrible analogy that a guy thinks he can go to Wake Forest and get more publicity than he's doing here. It's just it's a bad it's just a bad analogy.
No doubt. We'll have to see. We'll have you back on. Certainly, we'll see how things go with the Final Four, Coach, and certainly we'll see about. Do you think? Let me ask you this, and then we'll let you go. Do you think there's any more? Do you know of any more players that will transfer? Because I tell you, the last couple of days at work, on the street, different people that know we do the show and how much I love my Pirates say, "Oh my God, what in the world is going on? All these players are." And I try to explain to them about the transfer portal. But are there any more players you think they're going to leave now that Jaden's gone?
I don't know, but there were some that, and I won't mention their names, but there were some that went in recently that if there's a silver lining, it's the fact that they can transfer, because there were a few that had, in my opinion, had no business being able to. They were never going to play here. So,
Right.
I guarantee you, Coach Rock and the rest of the guys, they're studying that. I had 2 guys call me today about a guy from Purdue, and there's good players out there. And if Syracuse has to rebuild from the portal, then it's not an embarrassment that East Carolina has to. I mean, it's 2 years from now, everybody will be doing that. The idea of recruiting high school guys might be a thing of the past.
That's crazy to say, but I totally agree with you 100%. Coach, is always a huge honor to have you on. We'll see how things go, and we'll have you.
Oh, I just got
All
somebody joining me. Come here. Hey, you.
Oh, hey,
Drew.
hey, Drew. How are you?
Very good.
So happy to have you on. You're a celebrity, man. You're
Drew,
upstaging. As always,
you got no.
as always, you're upstaging your dad.
My dad.
My buddy. All right.
Yeah.
Man. Thanks, man.
Have a great night. Great to see you, Drew. All right. Good night. All right. Bye-bye. I love it. I love it. Coach Mike Steele and there. Drew Steele with a cameo. And that was awesome. That was awesome. Great stuff there from Coach Mike Steele. And that's Coach Mike Steele, Drew Steele. We appreciate them so much. Coach with us a long time. And we didn't expect to go this long tonight, folks, or whenever you're listening to it, but we appreciate them very, very much. I tell you what, we're very happy with, by the way, I got a couple more things and then we'll go. I want to send him a shout out. Congratulations to Mark Hessert of the Pirate Club. He retired today after 30 years. And I was going to say the beginning of the broadcast, and we got talking about Houston and basketball. And certainly we want to give our best to Mark. And he gave us 30 years. I mean, you are the best, Mark. I think a lot of you, and I know there's a lot of people in Pirate Nation that know you. And even if some that don't, they would appreciate me saying how much it means for all the hard work. And we didn't tell you enough how much you did behind the scenes for the Pirate Club. But I can tell you that I'm someone that knows your hard work, and I appreciate you very much. And I know all the fellas here, we wanted to wish you the best, and thank you for all the long days and nights and all the games and all the travel you did for Pirate Nation for that purple and gold. We know that you bleed purple and gold, and you definitely won't be forgotten. Thank you so much for that. Speaking of forgotten, how could you forget last night? Last night was why I'm tired tonight. With the big win with ECU over North Carolina, 11-10, a walk-off. Huge game in Greenville last night. Some fans unfortunately left, and they missed the best part. Pirates played very, very well. Looking forward to the big series coming up this weekend. As a matter of fact, the start time, I believe tomorrow, is going to be 4:00 if my memory serves. Malcolm Gray, the SID for baseball, I believe he sent that out, is tomorrow at 4:00. So if you're thinking about going to the game, you might be able to get, who knows, maybe you put a ladder up where you can see the game. Eventually we'll be able to see all the games, and I can't wait for that. I was talking to the folks at ECU yesterday, and I think it's around the 1,400 mark. If you're a Pirate Club member, those folks are allowed to get in, and they're trying really, really hard to get as many fans in as they can. It's a really tough situation with social distancing. So we appreciate all that John Gilbert and Ryan Robinson, everybody. They're trying really, really hard to get more fans in. I mean, out to the fact of the jungle. They're doing everything they possibly can. And I hope that we'll get announcements soon that we can get more fans in the stand, especially when it comes to regional and hosting our first regional coming up in June. That'll be fantastic. Want to remind you also about several other things we have coming up next week. Hopefully, it looks like we're working out the schedule with Nikita Koloff, the Russian Nightmare, and of course nephew of Ivan Koloff, who a lot of people know in Pirate Nation in Winterville. He actually was married our good friend Pirate Al, his wife Darlene. So we want to give him a shout out. We're going to have him on very, very soon. We'll of course have extra innings on Sunday night, brought to you by Next Level Training Center. And you can go to nextleveltrainingcenter.com. You make sure you go to see Trent Britt there, Wimbledon Drive in Greenville. I'm telling you, folks, they're fantastic when it comes to baseball, softball. They are the experts. They've been so good to us. They have a great Facebook page. Like their Facebook page, you can read a lot of cool stuff about what they have going on and all the different guys and gals that have come through there. They always give them shout outs of what they're doing at their respective universities and maybe even the major leagues. In the case for baseball, for sure. Also, speaking of baseball, want to give a shout out to Mark Menikazi for pgxgloves.com. We appreciate him for all that he has done for the program. And certainly, I tell you what, they do so much at pgxgloves.com. And we can't say enough great about them. They're just fantastic. In fact, they have lots of cool stuff. pgxgloves.com, custom baseball gloves. They have batting gloves. Personalized things, youth stuff. They have football gloves. Those of you that are golfers like Coach Mike Steele, get your golf gloves, a whole bunch of swag, great t-shirts again. And that's at pgxgloves.com. I tell you what, they are just fantabulous. They're just great stuff. It's something we always look forward to and love to go to their website. It's great. Again, go to pgxgloves.com. Don't forget, on our show Extra Innings, we'll have the PGX Player of the Week and the PGX also Pitcher of the Week, and that'll be coming up on Sunday for sure. All right, our special guest tonight, we had Sam Razz of the Scott Holman Pawdcast. Good luck to the Houston Cougars this weekend in Indianapolis as they're in the Final Four. Well, good luck to them, and also to former ECU basketball coach Mike Steele, our good friend and new and a buddy as well. We appreciate them. Thanks to Kyle and Bubba behind the scenes. Until next time, you've been watching and listening to our great, great show, and that's the Sports Objective. Good night.